So I am now back with Vertex Part 2. My first Vertex video was about the placements. It was about when you have your vertex in the houses, when you have your vertex in a certain sign. And I got this request from somebody not a year and a half ago to do a vertex synastry type of video. And in the words of Ashanti in the song with Ja Rule from over 20 years ago, I'm not always there when you call, but I'm always on time. So with my creative work or any spiritual work, unless it's a reading where I give myself a deadline, sometimes with videos, especially with nuanced topics, it takes me a while because I want to make sure I do the right research. I want to make sure that I frame it correctly. So some videos are very easy for me to do. I can do a transit video, but it took me a while to do this. So if you're the person that requested me to go more in depth with the vertex, here we go. All right. So if you want to check out my other video, I will link it below. If you're like new to this and you're like, what is a vertex? What are you talking about? I would suggest you go there first because this is talking about the relationships. And what I've told people before, I don't believe you can understand your relationship with people until you understand yourself. And so if you don't know your birth chart, if you don't know what planets mean, what the signs mean, you've got to study that first. So let me give some quick disclaimers, all right? One, to understand or know where the vertex is, you must have the birth time. Just like if you need the direct moon degree, just like if you need the ascendant, you got to have the birth time. Vertex signs and houses can change. So if I play around with someone's chart and I move it from 6:30 p.m. being born to 6:30 a.m., that vertex can change. If somebody was born at 12:30 p.m. and then we put it at 12:30 a.m., that vertex sign can change and that house placement. It's not the same as if you were born in a certain year and we can make assumptions that you have the same north node or south node as somebody born a month, earlier, or you have the same Chiron sign as someone born 3 months later, right? For the most part, we can kind of guesstimate, right? Sometimes because certain placements take longer to move. So just wanted to put that out there. It is best applied for existing monumental situation or interactions, right? When I talk about fate, and even when I do personal readings for people, I always say, here's what this vertex may mean for you. I want you to track if this has happened before, or you to just keep this in the back of your mind. We don't force fate. We don't force an encounter, right? And I say it's always best to kind of be applied in hindsight because we want to avoid false hope and delusion, especially when we talk about relationships. If you are looking at someone's vertex and you are not in a relationship with them yet and you're trying to piece together, are you supposed to be with this person? It can cause a lot of havoc. So I always give that disclaimer to people. The same vertex, if you have the same vertex, it means contact, it means impact. Impact does not have to mean you know someone for 25 years. Impact can mean I met this person while riding the train and they gave me good life advice. Impact can mean I met this person at a party and we had a great conversation. They made me not feel alone, right? It does not always mean long-term commitment or that the relationship will remain forever. I want to really get that out of there, okay? A fateful moment could be meeting an important professor in college, reuniting with a relative, or meeting a best friend. It is not always romantic, okay? Want to stamp that. Just because a relationship has no vertex points does not mean it lacks depth or spiritual meaning. That does not mean, oh my goodness, are me and my so-and-so not soulmates or whatever? Oh no, should we break up? That is not what we're talking about here. Like any placement, all the vertex does, it tells a narrative. Guess what? You could have the best relationship of your life, but your most impactful meeting was your stepchild or your own child or your grandmother, right? Like let's think broadly about this, okay? The most meaningful placements in terms of contact between your vertex or someone's vertex would be with another person's ascendant, sun, moon, Venus, if we are talking about relationships, or north node and south node. Okay, if any of those placements interact with another person's vertex, that can be considered important. And you might be like, well, what about Pluto? What about Neptune and Uranus? Those are outer planets, okay? And so they're less likely to have the same impact when we're talking about the vertex. Remember, the vertex is not your trait. It is not your personality. So we always want to start first with this, okay? We want to start first with the personal planets. And you might be like, well, Mars can be included at times, but I usually start with these. And then if I see a pattern and I want to talk about Mars and someone's vertex, we could do that. But just want to start with these. All and stamping this one last time, all meaningful relationships are not romantic. I think in society there's this obsession with romantic relationships. I feel like more people now are trying to find themselves, are trying to understand who they are without. I'm not at all saying there's anything wrong with being in a relationship or seeking that, but it's very important to know who you are so that who you are does not get buried under this label of being in some type of union with someone else. All right, I want to give this comment here. So the first time I did the video, I didn't talk about Vertex in the ninth house. And some people were like, it's missing. Where's Vertex in the ninth house? You didn't bring it up. So in a lot of the studies that I did originally, it didn't mention Vertex in the ninth house. It was more so fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. I've only had one client after that video with the ninth house Vertex. None of the clients I've done have had, and I've done many charts at this point, had a ninth house Vertex. I didn't have experience with it. So that's why I was like, I don't like to talk about things I don't have experience or research on. But it seems as though it has a lot to do with the place of birth, and people born in the southern hemisphere, people born close to the equator may have more of a possibility to have the vertex in ninth house. So if you do have your vertex in the ninth house, this is for you. I did not put it in my original video, but it basically means that you're likely to experience an in-depth experience that expands your life in a massive way, based on a journey or something that you encounter outside of your usual territory. You can come out of this experience feeling wiser or more purpose-driven, especially if you were in a stage of life where you felt very confused. Some big things. If you're someone that missed the first video and you're not watching the first video, I want to stamp some points that I had from my first video. So first of all, it's a fate indicator in the birth chart. And of course, the house matters. And of course, the degree matters, right? So I show here this little image here. You'll see like, okay, in someone's birth chart, this is a sample chart. See right here, this VX, this means this person has vertex in Scorpio 24th degree in the fifth house. So we would have to interpret, what does that mean? What is a possible fate situation they may encounter, an experience that could help them along the way? Okay, it is on the same hemisphere as the descendant. What you need to accept is what you're not in control of. Okay, it can show what destined experiences you may have. Okay, the sign is what trait you will eventually have to embody, and the house is what area of life do you need to accept that be, right? Maybe you're a person where you have no placements in the fifth house, but you have a vertex there, or you have no placements in the sixth house, but your experience allows for you to center and focus on that particular area. It is not a consistent presence or personality trait, okay? Just like, Juno is not a personality trait, right? It's not a personality trait, okay? And vertex industry can indicate karmic relationships, all right? In order to know a karmic relationship, I would like to see more indicators, right? There would be multiple things that I'd want to see in two people's charts to make that declaration. So you may say, okay, I have the same vertex as this person, and we're going to be together forever. Maybe, maybe not. And the person you have the same vertex with may not be your romantic partner. But the vertex of the same sign can mean you have similar experiences with awakening or fate. Like maybe 3 years from now or 3 years later, a relative or child has the same experience as you, a similar experience, right? And sometimes we're like, does it run in the family, right? But that could represent like having the same vertex. But the houses and the degrees will matter as well. It's less likely you're going to have the same exact experience as somebody else unless you're together in that experience because of your charts. Like if your vertex is at Leo at the 12th degree and theirs is at Leo at the 11th degree in the seventh house, they're both in the same house for you both, right? Like that would be different. But let's give an example. I like examples. So let's say someone has vertex in Leo at the eighth house, in the eighth, and someone has vertex in Leo in the fifth house, two people. Both may have a moment of discovery of talents or confidence, right? Again, a vertex is an experience. It's not a personality trait. It's not a personal planet. That vertex in Leo at the 29th degree person in the eighth house may exceed expectations and transform from their talents. 29th degree, right? Something they already possessed. They exceed. They didn't know. Maybe it was unexpected. It was unearthed. It was a hidden experience or something that they went through that they didn't know what they were going to get in the end, right? But they exceeded what they thought they were going to get. And now they feel more inclined to climb to the top. They feel better about, moving in a direction of really claiming what they are, claiming what they're good at, whatever the case may be. But the vertex in Leo, the 14th degree person in the fifth house may have a different experience. Now, again, all of this is going to matter. It's always going to matter what is the person's birth chart look like. Are they a Cancer sun? Are they a Virgo sun? Do they have Mars in Leo? Do they have Mars in Aquarius? Whatever. But that other person with the fifth house vertex, so now the fifth house has to do with projects and creativity and really owning the things that you're good at, right? Because the fifth house is still one of the personal houses. But this person may stop bouncing between hobbies and maybe find one that they're actually good at and choose to work on and develop. So for them, it's less about climbing to the top and transforming. It's about finding something they really like and honing in on it. See how that would be different. In terms of the relationship, each person's personal epiphany doesn't happen at the same time typically, okay? Just because you have the same vertex as someone does not mean you're going to experience the same fate. That's not how it works. But there's a shared experience in development, right? Each person may recognize this about themselves, and it can strengthen the relationship because you can grow together because you both understand monumental experiences and what's important, okay? I'm going to show you an example of two famous people who have the same vertex but are not in a partnership, not in a marriage anymore. So I'm going to show you that now, what we can discover about this couple. Now I want to show the example of a couple, a former couple, where they had the same actual vertex. So we know Tom Brady and Giselle. I looked up how to pronounce her name. If I say it incorrectly, I apologize, but I believe it's Bündchen is how you actually pronounce it. I know like some people don't pronounce it correctly, but they're divorced. And sorry, my second example is another couple that's divorced, but it's not about whether they stay together or divorce. It's not the point. I'm trying to talk about the vertex. And I don't want us to get caught up in like the fairy tale concept of vertex. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be with this person forever. Because relationships, can be meaningful even if they have extended past their time. If relationship is over, it doesn't mean it was any less meaningful, right? So what I found interesting about both of them, they have the same vertex in Taurus. Now within 7 degrees of each other, but you could argue that, even though they're within those degrees, that they're still relatively significant. I'm not doing a chart interpretation, a birth chart interpretation for them, but them both having Chiron and Taurus is also very interesting because it would have to do with some kind of wound from the past, especially when it came to holding on to resources or their idea of what security is. And what's interesting is both the 5th and the 17th degree are Leo degrees. It also could mean both of them having kind of this desire to identify what fun means to them. And I think the split was partially because of like she wanted him to retire. He was going to retire, and then they would have more time together, right? And then he came out of retirement, and it sounded like behind the scenes that wasn't what they had agreed on originally. And so beyond that, though, I think it's likely something to do with them just having different ideas of what fun means, different ideas of what it means to actually, for her, 17th degree, it's like, no, we need to improve, we now have time together, for our family. 5th degree is more of that I want what I want energy. The 17 is the one striving for more. Okay. And I have a video on degrees if you're like, whoa, what does that mean? I have a video called Sun Degrees if you want to check that out. It's a degree system that works for any placement. But when we're looking here, it's interesting because both of them have vertex and Taurus, but that does not mean they stayed together, but it does mean they built a lot together. They built, a family. They were, one of leading couples at one point, like, everyone knew that they were married, and like, when we look at their relationship, there's also some other interesting synastry points, her north node is conjunct his Saturn. Okay. Now, if we looked at their Venus signs, it also would give us a peek of like, well, was the relationship fated to stay or not? Venus in Gemini and Venus in Cancer have very different ideas of what a relationship entails. However, his Jupiter is conjunct her Venus. So, that the Gemini energy of their marriage at one point, there was a flow to it. They were probably very communicative. Even when he was away at games, I bet you they had a lot of conversation. She's someone that likes to keep her partner close to her in some way. Look at her Mercury, that 15th degree, right? For her, it's important. Daily communication is important. Hey, you're supposed to check in with me. Cancer needs a lot of security. She has her Cancer sun at the 28th degree, which is a Cancer degree. So I don't want to get into degrees right now, confuse people, but that's very important. But she's got that Mars in Libra. And Mars in Libra sometimes can be quite, there can sometimes be like power moves, passive aggressive energy sometimes. So that could be part of it. His Mars is in Gemini, so their Mars placements are also well aspected together. They trine. There was a flow to their marriage, and I think that's why they stayed married for so long. There was a flow, but just like anything in life, things happen. things change. Even with that moon conjunct Uranus, um, even like them having a spontaneous marriage are very many people that have like their own language. I would say probably like how some couples have their own language, their own way of dealing with each other. A lot of overlays here. They both have their Neptune conjunct Neptune retrograde. Maybe at some point dealing with different views on faith. Not them having different views, but them having like a similar outlook on beliefs or spiritual beliefs or religions or things of that nature. Just a lot of similar placements. Not surprising. They're going to have pretty much similar placements in terms of the outer planets because they were only born 3 years apart. And of course, we know planets such as Uranus and Neptune and Pluto don't travel that far. Right? They don't. They're shorter. I'm sorry, longer transits. Even with their Pluto conjunct Pluto in Libra, so we can even with like the Virgo energy. He has Mercury in Virgo. She has Saturn in Virgo. Those are not conjunct because they're at different degrees. They're not really close together. But there's a lot of overlay. Look at this. Jupiter conjunct Mercury conjunct Jupiter. I wonder if they communicate very well still to this day about the children. I just wonder. Now their moons are in very different energies. He's a fiery guy. He does what he wants. I think he's a very like, go with the flow type of guy. He likely says he is someone that's communicative. He's got that Mercury and Virgo. But also when we look here, especially when we look at the vertex, it's this preservation of what he has energy, right? I'm going to preserve what I have. I'm going to preserve what I need. I'm going to preserve the things that are important to me. That's kind of what I'm getting from him. And hers is more so, yes, let's preserve it, but we also can make it better. And I think that is likely what happened with their relationship, though they had a lot of shared energy. Look at this. I didn't even go over all the synastry. I don't want to because it's not the point of the video, but you will see this is an example of just because two people have the same vertex, they're going to be fated sometimes if other aspects of the chart line up to meet, to marry, to have a relationship, to maybe have kids together. Doesn't mean people always get married, but it is still fated. It just means it didn't work out. All right, let's talk about oppositions. Vertex opposing. What if the vertex the person has opposes the other vertex? Is that doomed? Not necessarily. We would want to look at what else is happening in the chart because maybe they have trines in other areas of the chart. But we talk about the vertex. What is this awareness both of these people have about life? And when we look at the vertex in the opposite sign, it can represent these people are learning from the other how to balance expectations or how to balance situations. Okay. They may discover different things about life, but together it can add up and make a union complete. And so I don't think oppositions are horrible. Oppositions are about, hey, what do you have? What do I have? How do we combine this together to be strong? An example could be a vertex in Capricorn in the 5th house. This person has an experience that changes that. They learn to focus and gain acknowledgement from their talent. They get more confident about what they do. And as a result of that, with that Capricorn influence, it becomes more of a goal for them. They are goal driven. They are dedicated. But the vertex in Cancer person may 10 years later or maybe 5 years before, or whatever the case may be, person recognizes what they can gain by meeting a person who they learn how to nurture or support. Maybe in their chart, this person is struggling to form connections with people. And maybe all they have is just vertex and Cancer in 7th. They have no placements. This vertex and Cancer person, though, maybe a situation happens where they start to help that vertex and Capricorn person out with an important project. And as a result of that project, it turns out to be an emotional turning point. The person that has the vertex in Cancer, who's been struggling a lot to connect to people, who, is very independent, likes to leave situations as soon as they get too close, maybe this person becomes more selfless and they realize rewards don't always have to be financial. And again, I'm saying all this with the assumption that in this person's chart, it would represent that this was something they needed to do, right? I have another example about opposition. To add on, a vertex and opposition can mean that a person may have a different awakening than you, but you can learn something from their renewed understanding if you both are willing to accept that you may have polarizing experiences. If I understand that in life, this is that thing you need to go through. When let's talk about relationships for a second. Sometimes people are going through relationships or marriages, and there's something the other partner goes through that's difficult. The loss of a parent, an illness, right? Difficulty finding their purpose, in some way, depression, whatever the substance abuse, whatever the case may be. Like sometimes it's hard to fully, be aware of what someone is going through. You can be empathetic and all of that, but it's difficult sometimes. But the point that I'm making is, though, even if you haven't had that experience, you still can find a way to understand, hey, here's where I'm coming from, here's where you're coming from, and what you're going through is just as valid. But when people have big situations, sometimes people can abandon them. And sometimes relationships need to end for various reasons. But when you think about the vertex and fate, it can sometimes mean a relationship is supposed to end. It can mean you break up with that person, and that's the monumental moment. Maybe that relationship was holding you back, and now you're free. Or then 2 years from now, you meet the person you're supposed to meet. You get what I'm saying? So, like, I don't want people to look at vertex as this fairy tale romantic placement. For some people, it is that beautiful, cosmic, karmic type of union, but it doesn't always mean that. And I'm always a person that wants to be realistic about astrology, and I want to be as transparent as possible. So we're not just living on a cloud. Now, another example here could be a vertex and Leo person who grows in personal confidence during the course of their relationship, but with the vertex and Aquarius person who now has a renewed sense of community. And so they have to figure it out. The Aquarius person is like, we have a dedication to the cause, we have a dedication to community. I now care about, right? Like it's not just about me, right? And the Leo person, the vertex and Leo person has an awakening of what matters to them in terms of who they are. What do they want to give to the world? Leo energy can embrace their talent and say, this is what I'm giving to the world. This is what I'm producing. So that is an example that can make and break a relationship because they're clearly operating on two different ways. I'm about to show you an example. I'm going to go into more detail. I'm going to forward to another screen in a moment with Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown as examples. But what if your vertex is in the same sign as your partner's personal planet? And it doesn't have to mean all of them. It means that the other person's planet making contact is influential to the person experiencing their vertex moment, or further influencing the vertex experience once it happens. Okay, it does not mean you're waiting for a partner. The vertex doesn't have to always have something to do with your partner. It simply means there's energy that flows to it, right? And so it can mean that you have your vertex moment, you have your epiphany, whatever happens in life that changes your life, and another person's energy helps secure that moment. It helps keep you going for some reason, or it helps further solidify what you've experienced, whether it was 5 years ago or not. It could be a vertex in Capricorn sixth house person who's dating a sun in Capricorn partner. And this vertex in Capricorn sixth house person recently learned the importance of, hey, you know what? I want to have my own career. I want my own business. I want to really dedicate my daily life to doing the things that I want to do. I want to be successful in my own right. Okay, maybe they quit their job. And then they meet the sun in Capricorn person where because the sun in Capricorn, I'm not saying all Capricorns are, boss energy and every single Capricorn in the entire world is, ambitious and successful. But what I'm saying is, let's say they are, right? And let's say this person maintains their success because their partner's job allows for them to continue to start their own business because their partner is financially stable and gives them business advice. So because of that vertex in Capricorn sixth house person is able to enjoy their not feel as much pressure because they can build their business up because they have a successful partner who can shoulder some of the responsibility or who knows how to run the game of business. Get what I'm saying? So that's an example. We're using Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown as an example of a vertex relationship, a relationship that likely was fated, that has some karmic energy to it because they were in the public eye. And their marriage, their relationship, we saw many of the different things that happened. And of course, if you were, of age at the time or, were aware enough of what was happening in pop culture or relationships between celebrities, you saw that there was a draw, there was a magnetism. And earlier on in her career, people were like, why are you dating Bobby Brown? Because Bobby had this reputation, especially when he was young, as like this bad boy. He had the bad boy image, but he was also very like charismatic. A lot of women had crushes on him. And Whitney was like America's sweetheart, right? Whitney was the voice. Whitney was, right, her image when she first came out was very like, crossover, pop, R&B, but like she went more R&B towards like the latter part of her career. But like, we all know Whitney, right? And so when we think of Whitney and getting her legacy, even after her death is huge, okay? But there were some relationship issues they had. There was, the drug use that they both partook in that you could, look at clips of. I don't think that really dampens Whitney's impact, right? Her voice, her legacy, right? And, people go through different things for different reasons. But anyway, people try to blame that on Bobby when really, a lot of people are like, no, she had dabbled in recreational drug use before she met Bobby. But anyway, that became the headline of their marriage, of their relationship, when of course there are more things within a relationship, but you can read up on all that if you really need to, the drama that ensued. They kind of had what you would call this like kind of like toxic love affair where like they were drawn to each other, they were attracted to each other, but there was just a lot of things in between that would happen. But anyway, we look here, we see, I give all that context for people that may not be as familiar with them. If you're younger, if you weren't around when they were married, that type of stuff. So Moon is conjunct Vertex. So his Virgo Moon is conjunct her Vertex in Scorpio. When we're looking at contact for relationships, we want to look at specific ones. We're going to start with the sun and the moon. We then can look at Venus. You can also look at any of the other planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, of course, even Pluto. Any of the planets conjunct someone's vertex will tell you a story. It'll tell you something about the reason why do people meet. The relationship between them can really be chronicled by some of the things that we know. We know that she was a Leo, right? Leo, we can see it in her. And she was an Aries moon as well, right? So she's this Leo and this Aries moon and this fiery, very independently confident woman who just exudes radiance and just eloquent, even like the way she spoke, though, her voice as well, like her speaking voice. But when we look here, the sun is conjunct his vertex, right? His vertex, 22nd degree, Capricorn, dealing with his work. His profile did raise by marrying Whitney Houston. I'm a fan of both of their music for sure. But his profile did raise because, again, she was more mainstream than Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown was more in the R&B circuits, right? And so Whitney, who had that more crossover appeal, we see that there was some status that was raised in his regard. And of course, there were times where that bothered him a little bit, right? Especially dealing with like people asking him like, why is Whitney with you and all that? But again, I also always feel like when two people are in a relationship, there's a reason why. And even though we can't see it on the outside, there's something people have in common. They actually did a song. They did a song together called that, Something in Common. And it's almost like, I wonder if that was a message to the people questioning the validity of their marriage. Even if a relationship can be viewed by the public as toxic or there's a lot of drama. At the end of the day, people still can have really intense, meaningful relationships with that. They also, as you can see, this is what I'm saying. This is interesting. Their synastry, and I'm not really trying to do a whole synastry reading about them. Their suns are in opposition directly at the 16th degree. The 16th degree is a Cancer degree. So Bobby had other children. They only had one biological child together, which was Bobby Christina, who unfortunately also passed away a few years after Whitney. But look at their sons. Their sons at the same degree, right? And so when we're thinking of like relationships and surface level stuff, and you're trying to figure out this vertex stuff, it's like we want to look at more than just the vertex to see like what is the purpose for this union coming together. And I wasn't in their relationship or marriage. I can't tell you the full purpose, but I can see here that we already see when we pull up their chart and we use this and we understand that the inner wheel, we're looking at the Pisces rising part of it, is Whitney, right? But what lands is when we look at where her vertex is hitting, her vertex is in her sun is in the 6th house of work. His vertex, right? When we talk about work, we talk about, yes, and I'm not saying that he wouldn't have been famous without her, because I believe Bobby is a Capricorn rising, which means already like that Saturnian. But again, he had went through a lot of cycles. Bobby dealing with addiction and just falling on hard times, like the arrests, things like that. He's had a whole journey. But this sun conjunct vertex is a big deal. Now it's within 6 degrees. If we went any further, like 29 degrees, it would make a little bit less of an impact, but it's still impactful enough. Then if we look, not only that, so we have Bobby Brown's vertex at the 22nd degree. Again, his independent vertex dealing with his success. His independent vertex is actually in the 8th house. His vertex in Leo at the 22nd degree is in the 8th house, transformation, right? A lot of people with vertex and Leo in the 8th house, there's an emphasis on talent. There's an emphasis on building that talent. There's an emphasis on being discovered somehow. What's also interesting about Bobby's chart is his vertex, his anti-vertex is in Aquarius, which means he had to break free first from New Edition, the group, to become the Bobby that he transformed into, which is why his vertex in the 8th house. So really fascinating stuff. But not only that, so I could stop there, but I can't stop there. Why? Look at this. Not only is her sun and his vertex conjunct, We could just leave it there, but we can't, because then if we look again at the chart, his moon is conjunct her vertex. So it's not just one person's chart. It's not just one angle. It's not just the one placement. It shows up again. Virgo energy. What do we know about Virgo? So definitely some emphasis on themes. Think of themes. Health. So then we don't think of like people who may have dealt with health or recovery. Remember recovery. That's a big theme. Bobby Brown has since recovered, obviously from his earlier past of drug usage, and they're not the only celebrities or people in the public eye who've used drugs. Okay, let's just call that what it is. We're not just gonna focus just on that. But what's interesting here is his moon being at the 19th degree is this emphasis on relationship. So Virgo deals with health, but it also can deal with work, service, remediation, fixing something, making something better, improving it. With her vertex in Virgo 20th degree, having to deal with very intense emotions to understand what you need to fix was likely a part of Whitney's situation. Vertex being the seventh house means a meaningful relationship. That relationship requires work. When you have a vertex in Virgo, it can sometimes represent. I have a vertex video about learning how to repair a relationship. If your vertex is seventh house, but if your vertex seventh house Virgo, fix something that's worth it, right? And so the moon here represents him caring enough to fix it. It wasn't perfect. No relationship is. And eventually, obviously, they divorced. He remarried, all that, but this is a part of why they didn't just split up. The first time someone heard something in the tabloids about Whitney and Bobby, they didn't just split up, right? They had a bond. Regardless of how it ended, they had some type of bond. And again, if we wanted to look further, we can look at all these other placements making contact. That moon making a conjunct to her Pluto in Virgo. That is the obsessive quality of Pluto. And Virgo is also fixated. Virgo can get really fixated on the details, on, getting really consumed and no, this is going to work. This is going to work. So there's a lot of interesting things happening with their synastry, even if you look at the Jupiter marriage. But one, Jupiter in retrograde, which is his, Jupiter in Libra, yes, a marriage, but in retrograde, meaning learning to really understand the bigger picture and the purpose of why you're married, right? But Jupiter also making a conjunct to her Mars. A lot of fascinating stuff going on with their charts. But I wanted to really showcase this interesting part of their vertex because it doesn't just happen one time with them. Both of their vertex placements make a significant conjunct to the other one of the person's personal planet. What about a vertex square? The sky's falling, the squares. Oh my goodness, the squares, right? And we know squares can produce challenges, but squares can also bring up things that we need to resolve. Squares can bring up things we need that challenge us so that we can grow. And squares can bring up things that we need to get over. We need to figure it out and just get over it sometimes. But with a vertex square, Gemini versus Pisces, right? Taurus versus Scorpio, whatever the case is, it can mean you have vastly differing life turning points. And again, like I said earlier, when people do have very vastly different experiences, or like I talked about with the opposition, like you're going through this and I'm going through this, or I've never experienced this and you're experiencing that, it can mean people, even if you're meant to meet, you were meant to meet. You were meant to move to that new city, even though that relationship didn't work out. You were meant to have children together. You were meant to get married, right? You were meant to do those things, even if it doesn't last. But it can mean these people will likely experience a time where it's difficult to relate to their fated situation. Meaning, I can't relate to you right now because what you're going through is so drastically different than me, or drastically different than what I know, that I don't know if I can deal with this. So sometimes a vertex square is like, you might meet a person who challenges you, so you can learn certain things. You have unresolved childhood trauma, but you didn't realize that until you got in a relationship with someone, or you had a toxic best friend who bullied you, and you're like, wait, this feels familiar. This feels like what I dealt with when I was a kid, right? Like in that moment, for some people, you could have a vertex square seventh house Scorpio, and you're learning to break free from people who are controlling you, to break free from people who are secretive, manipulative, mean to you, right? For some people, that's what their vertex moment could mean, right? But if it's a square, it means understanding and awareness of each other's experiences is key, right? Because a square is going to be difficult. It's going to be like you might not even recognize the person anymore. And so it can be a make or break. You know, part of fate isn't just a fairy tale wedding. Part of fate is knowing when things have to end, knowing when things have you've outgrown certain people. And it doesn't always have to mean romantic relationships. It can mean family, it can mean friends as well. But here's an example of a square. Let's say someone has their vertex in Aries directly squaring vertex in Capricorn. The Vertex and Capricorn person may have had experienced a sobering moment where they had to learn discipline, and now they feel like they're way better at understanding how to maneuver life and the world and the rules of the world. But the Vertex person learns to embrace their independence and break free from restriction. So that's where you can see a difference. You didn't used to do this, right? Why are you trying to be so, risk taking? Why are you going out and doing so many things without telling me? That Vertex and Aries person, for whatever reason or whatever else is happening in their chart and their transits, may have to do that. That may just maybe they have Saturn and Aries in retrograde. And they have to do this. This is a part of their growing period. Maybe they're going through their Saturn return. Well, Saturn and Aries is no, right? People with Saturn and Aries is not yet. People Saturn and Aries will be soon. But that's what I'm saying. Give an example there. So that is where we say, like, it could be your fate to deal with conflict. It could be your fate to deal with situation. It could be your fate to deal with somebody that pushes you to a point where you're like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. Or, you know what? Because you have, it also could be someone challenging you in a good way. It could be that person who's always like, nope, you need to do better. No, you got to do it again. Nope, you can't give up. So squares don't always mean, horrible things. It can mean also people pushing us in a way in which we might feel uncomfortable, but it's really for our growth. A try. Vertex trines can represent ways in which others' experiences fold into each other harmonically. It is a sense of, it's a recognition, and there's an awareness of their core experience. So I gave an example of the Vertex and Scorpio person dealt with a very serious change in how they tend to their daily life. Sixth house, maybe it has to do with health, right? And the Vertex and Cancer person previously had an experience of learning how to give more care in relationships. So that Vertex and Cancer person might have already had their Vertex moment, but they're complementary, right? This person is complementary to the Vertex and Scorpio person's needs. And the Vertex and Scorpio has learned to show up for people more after a serious event. Maybe they had a life, life and death situation. And now they're receptive to the Vertex and Cancer. So this is how that energy can really balance and work off of each other. Not really balance in the same way as like oppositions need to, but the trines are flowing together. We understand each other. We are flowing. We are in sync, and we're figuring out how to best tend to each other because we understand the wavelength of one another, even though we are a little bit different. So sextile signs, which are two signs apart, Virgo and Scorpio, Virgo and Cancer, Gemini and Aries, Aquarius and Sagittarius, whatever, right? There's acceptance. Remember, sextile is not as potent many times as some of the other aspects, but it can still be felt. And so, example could be a person who has a Vertex in Virgo, who now has a steady job due to finding their niche, may find a Vertex in Capricorn person in eighth. Who may have experienced a drastic change. So that person experienced a more drastic change, maybe it was a little bit more jarring for that Vertex and Capricorn person. But the other person will understand the importance of dedicating yourself to something that produces results and keeps you grounded, because Virgo and Capricorn are both earth signs. So even though they went through something different, there will be like an acceptance and understanding. Okay, I understand why you have to work so hard on this because it matters to you, because you really, right? Even though Virgo may sometimes be like, no, I'm just doing it because I'm fixated mentally. And Capricorn is like, I'm doing this because I want to achieve this goal. I want to end result. So different things we know with Virgo and Capricorn, but they're both earth signs. And so there's still a shared understanding of producing something. I think a vertex conjunct the other person's north node can be quite helpful. Again, it depends on if the north node person is conscious enough of their north node, right? Because remember, we are trying to tap into our north node. We are already masters of our south node. We already did that. But the vertex conjunct the other person's north node can indicate that the north node person's acceptance of their node or actions impacts the other person's journey. So this is one that I do like to see and some people sometimes this is a really clear fate indicator in my opinion. The vertex making contact with nodes, to me, because we know the nodes deal with karma. They can deal with that kind of karmic relationship type of thing. So if you see this can be good. Again, it doesn't mean you have to be in a romantic relationship. Doesn't mean this is the person you're going to be with for 50, 60 years. It means this is an impactful relationship. Here's an example that's non-romantic. Let's say it's a North Node in Sagittarius boss. This is a person who's already worked on their North Node. They understand they're supposed to experiment with the world and go on journeys and gain knowledge, right? And seek instead of just asking the questions, which is like the South Node in Gemini. It is about adventure, right? Gemini is the one that is, asking the questions, the learning. Gemini is disseminating information. Sag, we know, is knowledge. But so let's say this is the North Node and Sag boss who enjoys travel. They meet a Vertex and Sagittarius employee who they encourage to travel more for work, putting them on a special assignment. So that North Node and Sagittarius person, because they embody this, they want everybody else to embody it. They don't know, they might not even know this person as a Vertex and Sagittarius. They may not even be into astrology. But this person may say, you know what, Scott, instead of staying here on the home base, I'm actually going to ask you to go to Canada. I'm actually going to ask you to go to Brazil. I'm actually going to send you, to our company headquarters in another. You need to branch out more. This person might be reluctant, but on their travel journey, the employee realizes what country they'd rather move to and have a full awakening. Again, that's very, lofty, but that can be an example of like the vertex is an important moment for you. It doesn't really matter who taps into it. It can be somebody that's you never meet again. It can be somebody that you know for only 2 years. It could be someone that you know for a temporary amount of time, but they spark something in you that's important. Now, the South Node, we know we are dealing with the karmic past, right? When you have the vertexes conjunct the other person's South Node, it can indicate that the South Node person's traits or actions support the vertex person. Remember, your South Node is what you're born into already being or knowing. When I look at my South Node, I get it. I'm like, oh, I was already came into this world as a young age and I knew certain things that I liked, but then I have to expand that, right? Like I have to go beyond that if I want to grow, just like you do. Same thing. Okay. So though this person needs to strive for their own North Node, the South Node person, right? They embrace the energy that the vertex person may come to experience because that South Node person already has that energy. Hope that makes sense. They already have it. Your South Node doesn't disappear because you tap into your North Node. I have all these North Node videos, so if you're sitting here confused, please go to those. I have a whole playlist of nodes for the houses, for the signs, how to, use your North Node, all of that. So an example would be Vertex in Aries conjunct South Node in Aries. Okay. So the Vertex and Aries person may struggle with independence. They may struggle with risk taking. They may struggle with being their own person. Maybe they grew up in a family of 5 and they were the oldest and they always had to take care of everybody. And they feel like they always have to do that now. But they're really here to learn how to work on themselves to improve their own life. Vertex in 6th house, maybe. They see the importance of being self-driven because they see that South Node in Aries person. That South Node in Aries person is striving to be North Node in Libra, but they still have remnants. They're still the strongest part of them is going to be that Aries energy because they're coming into the world already having that. So this person can accept the role when the Vertex and Aries person learns from watching the South Node person to accept the role when the time comes because it's a strength the other person possesses. And because they see that that's possible when their Vertex moment comes, they can better seize it. They can better say, you know what, I guess I just got to go and do it. Hopefully that makes sense. Try to give examples so that things are a little bit clearer. Now, what about if the Vertex is opposing the other person's South Node? This can indicate that the South Node person's traits or actions can act as triggers for the Vertex person to accept a role task that seems to help, but it's also allowing them to grow. So you can feel daunted in this very nuanced placement situation, right? Because the South Node person, their South Node is opposing your Vertex. So whenever that moment happens, it can feel very polarizing. It can be like, why am I doing this? Because when you hear Vertex and you hear a fate, a lot of people are like, ooh, what great things are going to happen for me? Very few people understand that you can gain confidence by being responsible for something that's beyond you. Being responsible for other people or doing something to help other people, I know it can feel subservient, but sometimes that's what's needed. You are needed not to be subservient, but your goal to help somebody, then you see what you're capable of. Wow, I didn't know I could do that. Wow, I made a big impact in this person's life. All right? But you can sometimes help them, okay? Like your Vertex moment might have something to do with really helping them resolve their South Node issue. That's why I said the nodes are really karmic, especially when we're talking about Vertex and fate. It gets really deep, okay? So let me give this example and hopefully this makes sense. The vertex and Virgo opposing a Pisces South Node person. So the Virgo and vertex person, before they even hit that vertex, maybe they see a person sabotaging. So a person they know is self-sabotaging. They're stuck in that Pisces South Node mode. They are not fixing the issue. They're indulging in the issue, right? They're indulging in the traits they already came into this world having. Your South Node, you already came to the world knowing how to do that. That doesn't mean it goes away, but it means you're ascending to your North Node, hopefully, right? A good example of this could be a parent who has an adult child, but the adult child maybe is taking, is drinking a lot. Their diet is bad. And they want to help them have better habits and be more health conscious, because if they're a North Node in Virgo, part of that is self improvement. Part of that can be health. It is diet. It is, making sure we're taking care of ourselves physically. This leads the vertex and Virgo person. Again, they may not even know this, right? Because a lot of times with our vertex, we didn't even know, right? I didn't even understand. When I first started studying astrology, I didn't even focus on the vertex. So when I realized what a vertex was, I was able to go back and see when the moment happened. But anyway, this leads the parent to also model and change their diet, and they lose a lot of weight that they held on to for years. So for this vertex and Virgo person, maybe this vertex in the seventh house, their relationship with their kid helped them improve their own health. That was a turning moment for them. Though they thought they were just helping their child, they actually were helping themselves. And that would be like an example of how that could be possible. Now, what about this? I think this is the last one I'm going to talk about. What if the vertex, I talked about the vertex conjunct a person's personal planet. What about opposing a person's personal planet? All right, vertex and Taurus opposing a person's Scorpio moon. The intensity of a relationship with the Scorpio moon may allow the purpose to accept more, allow you to be more purposeful, accept more simplicity in your life. Because what may have happened is this Scorpio moon person, this is not me judging Scorpio moons, but let's say in this situation, the Scorpio moon is intense and there's a lot of emotions and you hold on to that and you love this relationship and you really want to be with this person. But really, your vertex moment is going to be releasing intensity, understanding simplicity. You learn you don't have to get caught up in the intense emotions of others. Vertex and Taurus may be fifth house, and you're learning how to back away from intense things. Fifth house is not intense, right? It's not a house of intensity. You back away from that. You find pleasure in something that is a resource that you have. You find pleasure in something that allows for you to have leisure time. You find pleasure in something that's self-care. If we talk about Taurus, we talk about this idea of like, the senses, our body, making sure we are nourishing it, right? So Virgo is the body in terms of the health, the routines, the things we got to do, whereas Taurus is indulging in the pleasures of things. And so for you, it could be learning that maybe you're a person where you never focus on self-care. You're always worried about your partner. You're always worried about, the intensity of a relationship and the ups and downs. So people get addicted to that. But really, you go to the spa with your friend one day and you realize, wow, I really need to do this more. And because you go and do that more, you end up having a greater sense of life quality, because you start to invest more in yourself and you aren't so attached to the extremes. That can sometimes happen in your relationships or with the Scorpio moon person. And I'm not saying that's always Scorpio moons, but maybe your energy in your chart is that's what happens. Maybe that Scorpio moon is also squaring your moon. Vertex signs opposing each other. I talked about the vertex opposing the South Node. What about the North Node? So as we know, the North Node is our life purpose, our part of our life path. The North Node is what we are striving for in this lifetime. The South Node is our past or our past life energy, which we're already born into our North Node, knowing how to master that energy, and we're striving to, bring things full circle with the North Node. So if someone's vertex opposes the other person's North Node, it can mean you're on very different paths of reckoning, right? And there's going to be a time where there's like a difference in how you proceed through life. Somebody may say, within the relationship, you notice that you are on different sides of things. Your partner may not agree with you on something. And especially the vertex person who goes through a very extreme experience could be, something that is really riveting. And your partner's kind of like, no, I can't relate to that. Or no, I don't agree with that. So for example, let's say a person has their vertex in Libra in the eighth house. Let's say they meet a friend and they start to dabble more into the unseen or the occult because of that friend. But this person already have their own intuitive abilities, and simply by meeting someone who is, trained in this area or has more knowledge, they get to feel more comfortable expressing that part of themselves. They start to believe in twin flames. They start to believe in karmic relationships, whatever the case may be. This is fictional, but I'm using astrological placements to help you understand this. But let's say their partner has their North Node in Aries in the ninth house. And let's say they've been working on their North Node. They're focused on their own journey. Aries, North Node. They're focused on working through what they need and being instinctual and going on their own journeys and quests. So if your partner comes to you and you have this North Node and you're like, hey, I want you to do this thing. Hey, look at, I think this would be a great opportunity for us to both get involved in this. That North Node in Aries ninth house person is working on self and they're working on experience. And if that North Node in Aries person has not experienced it, ninth house, and they're working with their ninth house, let's make it even stronger if there's a planet there. That person may go against their partner or may say they just disagree. They need to experience it for themselves. They can't take you at your word that what you're saying makes sense or that it works. This person would need to experience it ninth house. They would need to truly believe in it before they just adopt your sense of what life should be or before they just go with the flow. Doesn't mean that they don't accept what you're doing. But if you're trying to get someone to come along for the ride with you, it may not happen in the way that you want. And guess what? In relationships, you don't have to have the same interests or beliefs. It helps to have the same beliefs, the same values, the same morals. But couples have all different types of different things that they, believe or practice or appreciate that their partner may not be, as in tune with, right? You have some people that are vegetarians, but their partner's a meat eater, right? But when you're vertex opposing someone's North Node, right? It means that whatever you're going through, that experience, that epiphany moment, it may not be something that the other person can easily recognize or go with, unless that person is operating in their South Node. If this person's partner is still operating in their South Node in Libra, then they're going to go along with it and be like, yeah, cool, all right, let's do it. Whereas if they're striving to their own purpose, that North Node in Aries is what they need to be tapping into. And that's why it's so important for us to know our own charts. We can unionize with people, we can collaborate with people, we can join relationships, all those things. But at the end of the day, we have our own purpose and point for being here as well. And yes, other people are a part of our lives, but at the same time, we can't lose track of what we are here to do. Vertex is a very nuanced topic. I hope it didn't confuse people, but this is how deep it is, and this is why it took me a long time to do this video. I wanted to do it correctly. I wanted to do it with justice in the way that I felt it should be done. I didn't want to rush it. And if needed, I'll do a part 3 where I'll talk about some other Vertex, placements or some other Vertex, situations. Feel free, if you did not watch the first video, to watch the first video to learn a little bit more about your Vertex sign.